But all the nations where the best policy was established have been of this mind. In Greece, public rewards were enacted to be given, and honors appointed for several cities, to those that should kill tyrants, from the mightiest of them to the meanest, with whom they thought there was no bond of humanity to be kept. Hence, Thebe is usually commended for killing her husband, Timalaean for killing his brother, because they were pernicious and destructive to the commonwealth, which, though it seem not justifiable because of the breach of relation of natural subjection, yet it shows what sentiments the most politic nations have had of this practice. As also among the Romans, Cassius is commended for killing his son, and Fulvius for killing his own son, going to Catiline, and Brutus for killing his kinsmen, having understood that they had conspired to introduce tyranny again. Servilius Ahala is commended for killing, even in the court, Septimius, turning his back and refusing to compare in judgment, and for this was never judged guilty of bloodshed, but thought nobiliate by the slaughter of a tyrant, and all posterity did affirm the same. Cicero, speaking of the slaughter of Caesar, styles it a famous and divine fact and put to imitation. Sulpicius Asper, being asked why he had combined with others against Nero, and thought to have killed him, made this bold reply, quote, that he knew not any other way to put a stop to his villainies and redeem the world from the infection of his example and the evils which they groaned under by reason of his crimes, unquote. On the contrary, Domitius Corbulo is reprehended by all for neglecting the safety of mankind in not putting an end to Nero's cruelty, when he might very easily have done it. And not only was he by the Romans reprehended, but by Curates, the Persian king, being not all afraid, lest it should afterward befall an example unto himself. When the ministers of Caius Caligula, a most cruel tyrant, were, with the like cruelty, tumultuating for the slaughter of their master, requiring them that killed him to be punished, Valerius Acidicus, the senator, cried out aloud, quote, I wish I had killed him, unquote, and thereby both composed their clamor and stopped their rage. Quote, for there is so great force in an honest deed, saith Buchanan, De Jure Regina, relating this passage, that the very lightest show thereof, being presented to the minds of men, the most furious assaults are allayed, and fury will languish, and madness itself must acknowledge the sovereignty of reason, unquote. The Senate of Rome did often approve the fact, though done without their orders, oftentimes by private hands, as upon the slaughter of Commodius. Instead of revenging it, they decreed that his carcass should be exposed and torn to pieces. Sometimes they ordered beforehand to have it done, as when they condemned Didymus Julianus and sent a tribune to slay him in the palace. Nay, they have gone so far as in some cases to appoint reward for such as should kill those tyrants that trampled under their laws and murdered virtuous and innocent people, as that sentence of the Senate against the two Maximini doth witness. Whosoever killeth them deserves a reward. Buchanan, as above, rehearsing many instances of this nature, gives reason of their approvableness, and these I find here and there scattered in his book, De Jure Regina. Number 1. They that make a prey of the commonwealth are not joined to us by any civil bond or tie of humanity, but should be accounted the most capital enemies of God and of all men. 2. They are not to be counted as within human society, but transgressors of the limits thereof, which whoso will not enter into and contain himself within should be taken and treated as wolves or other kinds of noisome beasts, which whosoever spares he preserves them to his own destruction and of others, and whosoever killeth doth not only good to himself but to all others, and therefore doth merit rather reward than to be condemned for it. For if any man, divested of humanity, should degenerate into such cruelty as he would not meet with other men but for their destruction, as the monsters I am speaking of could meet with none of the party here treated on but to this effect, he is not to be called a man, no more than satyrs, apes, or bears. Thirdly, it is expressly commanded to cut off wickedness and wicked men, without any exception of rank or degree. And if kings would abandon the counsels of wicked men and measure their greatness rather by duties of virtue than by the impunity of evil deeds, They would not be grieved for the punishment of tyrants, nor think that royal majesty is lessened by their destruction, but rather be glad that it is purged from such a stain of wickedness. Fourth, what is here to be reprehended? Is it the cause of their punishment? That is palpable. It is the law which adjures them to punishment. Is it the law which adjures them to punishment? All laws were desired as necessary for repressing tyrants. Whosoever doth condemn this must likewise condemn all the laws of nations. Is it the person executing the laws? Where will any other be found to do it in such circumstances? Fifthly, a lawful war being once undertaken with an enemy for a just cause, it is lawful not only for the whole people to kill that enemy, but for every one of them. Every one therefore may kill a tyrant who is a public enemy, with whom all good men have a perpetual warfare. Meaning, if he be a habitually tyrannical and destructive to the people, so that there is no living for good people for him. Otherwise, though a man by force or fraud acquire sovereignty, no such violence is to be done to him, providing he use a moderate way in his government, such as Vespasian among the Romans, Hero in Syracuse. Sixth, treason cannot be committed against one who destroys all laws and liberties of the people, and is a pernicious plague to the commonwealth. Number 2. Second, such is the force of this truth in the case of circumstantiate that it extorts the acknowledgment of the greatest authors, ancient and modern, domestic and foreign, and even of all rational royalists, as Mr. Mitchell says in this postscript to the forecited letter, quote, that it is lawful for any private person to kill a tyrant without a title, and kill Tories or open murderers as devouring beasts, because the good of his action doth not only redound to the person himself, but to the whole commonwealth, and the person acting incurs the danger himself alone, unquote. Tertullian, though a man loyal to excess, says every man is a soldier enrolled to bear arms against all traitors and public enemies. The ancient ecclesiastic historian, Sozomen, relating the death of Julian, and intimating that he was supposed to have been slain by a Christian soldier, adds, let none be so rash as to condemn the person that did it, considering he was thus courageous in behalf of God and religion. Sozomen History, Lib 6, Cap 2. Barclayus, a great royalist, saith, all antiquity agrees that tyrants as public enemies may most justly be attacked and slain, not only by the community, but also by every individual person thereof. Grotius de jure belli, Lib 1, Cap 4, saith, if any person grasp at domination by unjust war, where hath no title thereto by consent of the community, and no paction is made with him, nor allegiance granted, but retains possession by violence only, the right of war remains, and therefore it is lawful to attack him as an enemy, who may be killed by any man, and that lawfully. Yea, King James VI, in his remonstrance for the right of kings, says, the public laws make it lawful and free for any person, or for any private persons, to enterprise against an usurper. Divines say the same. Shamer, Tom 2, Lib 15, Cap 12, Section 19. All subjects have right to attack tyrants. Alsted, Theology, Gas, Cap 17, Reg 9, page 321. Any private man may and ought to cut off a tyrant who is an invader without a title, because in a hostile manner he invades his native country. And Cap 1, 18, Reg 14, page 332, quote, it is lawful for every private man to kill a tyrant who unjustly invades the government, unquote. But Dr. Ames, concerning conscience, Book 3, Chapter 31, concerning manslaughter, asserts all that is here pleaded for in express terms. Question 4. Whether or no is it lawful for a man to kill another by his own private authority? Answer. Sometimes it is lawful to kill, no public precognition preceding. But then only when the cause evidently requires that it should be done, and public authority cannot be got. For in that case a private man is publicly constitute the minister of justice, as well by the permission of God as the consent of all men. These propositions carry such an evidence in them, that the authors thought it superfluous to confirm them, and sufficient to affirm them. And for any reason that can be adduced to prove any of these assertions, it will be as evident that this truth I plead for is thereby confirmed, as that itself is thereby strengthened. For it will follow natively, if tyrants and tyrants without a title be to be thus dealt with, then the monsters of whom the question is, those notorious incendiaries and murdering public enemies, are also to be so served. For either these authors assert the lawfulness of so treating tyrants without a title because they are tyrants, or because they want a title. If the first be said, then all tyrants are to be so served, and reason would say, and royalists will subscribe, if tyrants that call themselves kings may be so animadverted upon, because of their perniciousness to the commonwealth by the usurped authority, then the subordinate firebrands that are the immediate instruments of their destruction, the inferior emissaries that act it, and actually accomplish it, in murdering innocent people, may be so treated. For their persons are not more sacred than the other, nor more unpunishable. If the second be said, it is lawful to kill them because they want a title. Then it is either because they want a pretended title, or because they want a real and lawful one. The latter is as good as none, and it is proven in Head 2, Argument 7, that no tyrants can have any. The former cannot be said, for all tyrants will pretend some, at least before they be killed. Third, but though some of these great authors neither give their reasons for what they assert, nor do they extend it to all tyrants that tyrannize by virtue of their pretended authority, yet it will not be difficult to prove that all, great and small, that murder, destroy, and tyrannize over poor people, are to be punished, though they pretend authority for what they do. And hence, if all tyrants, murderers, and destroyers of mankind ought to be punished, then when it cannot be done by public authority, it may be done by private. But all tyrants, murderers, and destroyers of mankind ought to be punished. Therefore, the minor is manifest from the general commands of shedding the blood of every man that sheds it, Genesis 9, verse 6, of putting to death whosoever killeth any person, Numbers 35, verses 30 and 31, of respecting no man's person in judgment, Deuteronomy 1, verse 17. And universally all penal laws are generally without exception of any. For under that reduplication of criminal transgressing those laws, under that general sanction, they are to be judged, which admits of no partial respect. For if the greatest of men be murderers, they are not to be considered as great, but as murderers. Just as the meanest are to be considered as mean or poor, but as murderers. But I need not insist on this being sufficiently proved, Head number 2, Argument 9, and throughout that head, proving that tyrants can have no authority, and if they have no authority, then authority, which they have not, cannot exempt them from punishment. The connection of the major proposition may be thus urged: when this judgment cannot be executed by public authority, either it must be done by private authority in case of extreme necessity, or not at all. For there is no medium, but either to do it by public authority or private. If not at all, then the land must remain still defiled with blood, and cannot be cleansed, Numbers 35, verse 33. Then the fierce anger of the Lord cannot be averted, Numbers 35, verse 4. For without this executing of judgment he will not turn it away, Jeremiah 5, 1. Then must murderers be encouraged by their impunity to make havoc of all according to their lust, besides the poor handful who cannot escape their prey, as their case is circumstantiate. Besides, this is point-blank contrary to these general commands which say peremptorily the murderer shall be put to death. But this supposed case, when public authority will not or cannot put them to death, says they shall not be put to death. In this case, then, I demand whether their impunity is necessary because they must not be put to death, or because they cannot be put to death. To say the latter were an untruth, for private persons can do it when they get access, which is possible. If the former, then it is clearly contradictory to the commands, which say they must be put to death, excepting no case, but when they cannot be put to death. If it be said they must not be put to death because the law obliges only public authority to execute judgment, to this I reply, firstly, I trust to make the contrary appear from Scripture by and by. Secondly, if the law obliges none but those in public authority to execute judgment, then, when there is no judgment to execute, it must be the sin of none but those in public authority. And if it be only their sin, how comes others to be threatened and punished for this, that judgment is not executed, if they must only stand by and be spectators of their omissions unconcerned? What shall they do to evite this wrath? Shall they exhort them, or witness against them? But that more than all this is required is proved before several times, where this argument of peoples being punished for the sin of their rulers hath been touched. Third, then when there is no authority, it must be no sin at all that judgment is not executed, because it is the sin of none, it cannot be sin, except it be the sin of some. Fourth, what if those in public authority be murderers? Who shall put them to death? By what authority shall judgment be executed upon them, whether public or private? Public it cannot be, for there is no formal public authority above the supreme, who are supposed the party to be punished. If it be the radical authority of the people, which is the thing we plead for, then it is but private, as that of one party against the other. The people are the party grieved, and so cannot be judges. At best, then, this will be extrajudicial executing of judgment. And if the people may do it upon the greatest of tyrants, then a part of them, who are in greatest hazard, may save themselves from those of lesser note, by putting them to death. For if all the people have right to punish universal tyrants, because they are destroyers of all, then a part hath right to punish particular tyrants, because they are destroyers of them, when they cannot have access to public authority, nor the concurrence of the whole body.